Hello everybody and welcome to another Box Tail Scoop. I'm Antonia and this is Noel and we are from Box Tail Soup Theatre Company.
I'm going to say this at the beginning now, I'm going to start doing it at the start. If you haven't already, please do give us a thumbs up, hit the like button or subscribe if you haven't already, that would be great. So in the last video we were making a comparison between the stuff that we drew on the page, the initial ideas that we had for the set and stuff like that, and how it ended up in the show for real. We thought today that it would be interesting to talk about and give a few examples of the ideas that we came up with in rehearsal as compared to what we actually did in the show. So we've got a bit of video from an early rehearsal and we've got some great footage from the dress rehearsal on stage at the Everyman.
Yes, so the rehearsal video we have is from the very first R&D, Research and Development Week that we did. And so they were very early ideas. You'll notice in the rehearsal footage there is no set. We're just using stand-in things that we had in the store from other shows. The puppets are, if they're there, they are very much sort of skeletons of the actual thing.
We had one or two bits and pieces, didn't we?
Some of them are just heads, and some of them we didn't have at all. So it's interesting to look back over it. It's been really interesting for us actually, looking back at it and seeing what we did keep and what we didn't. Mm-hmm. And at that stage of rehearsals, it's probably worth saying, I think we've said so before, we allow ourselves the freedom to explore any ideas we can think of. We don't worry too much about the practicalities of things at that stage. In here, obviously, we were working in a smaller space than the stage space we had. So I think there are a couple of times, even in the clips that we're going to show you, where one of us says, oh, it'll be fine, we've got to have more room in the real thing. Mm. So the first sequence we're going to look at is very, very near the beginning. And it's the sequence where we set up Scrooge's counting house, Scrooge's office.
Which is the first kind of real place that we go to.
And it's the first real sort of scene change, if you like. So we'll show you that clip from the rehearsal now.
Scrooge and Marley were partners for many years. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood. Years afterwards, above the counting house door, Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley.
But he answered to both.
It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as a flint, secret and solitary as an oyster. He carried his own low temperature always about him, always with him. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. Once upon a time, of all the good days of the year, on Christmas Eve.
You open yours up. I open mine up. So you'll have seen in that clip that I think we did a little bump cut at one point because there are various moments where in the rehearsal we didn't want to bore you with too much of it, otherwise it ends up being a very lengthy clip where we're having to kind of discuss what we're doing and you know, we got it wrong.
We were trying to do a very tentative stumble through the whole show, but obviously we're still pausing and figuring out, oh, do you move that then, do you move that there? So we thought you didn't need to hear that whole discussion.
We spared you that one. Yeah. So you'll see that we, like I said, we weren't using any of the real set. We had some stands from some other shows. We're marking props. At the end, I think Noel does this sort of gesture, which is him folding out the desk top of Scrooge's desk. So I think it's probably best for us now to show you the clip from the actual show, and then we can talk about what changed and what stayed. So here's the clip of the same sequence from the actual thing.
Scrooge and Marley were partners for many years. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years later, above the counting house door. Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley.
But he answered to both.
It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A grasping, squeezing, wrenching, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint. Secret and solitary as an oyster. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. Once upon a time, of all the good days of the year, on Christmas Eve,
So you'll notice, obviously, it's a lot slicker. We've choreographed it much better, but the essence, I think, is still what we came up with in that R&D.
Yeah, the central idea of kind of building it together, it's still very much there, isn't it? And we still kept the idea from your very early drawing, in fact, that Scrooge's desk had got these 4 posts and Bob's got this little desk over there on his own. Yeah, and it's just more fluid, and we worked on the kind of sense of creating it together so that it's going along with the narration. It's not quite so frantic either. I feel like we felt like we could take a bit of time with it.
Yes, we definitely took our time with it to make it so that actually it was almost, it's sort of, the idea is, I suppose, that it's elegantly done enough so that for the audience it doesn't detract from the lovely narration that you're doing, but that we land in then this really lovely picture and the lights come up on the office.
And because it's the first one you've done in the show, you also want to take a little bit more time for the audience to get the idea of how this is going to work and kind of see.
Yeah, you're sort of showing them the rules of the game of the show.
Yeah, very much. You're establishing that stuff, and then there's a couple of little practical things. You know, you'd have to be watching quite carefully, but you'll notice that we swapped over who puts the lamppost at the front and who puts it at the back, because it just made more sense in terms of where we were moving around the stage.
And we did that line, the line came on the giving over of the desk lid and step rather than on the putting down of the posts. And then we had to take our time folding out together the lid of Scrooge's desk, which was a practical thing. The actual piece of scenery needed to be done in that first bit smoothly by 2 people.
But to be fair, given that rehearsal was just at the end of the very first week, it's not that far from what we ended up with.
So the next clip we want to show you is to do with Marley, the ghost of Marley. And you will notice in the clip that it's me just mugging my way through it. The ghost of Marley, we knew at this stage is going to be a puppet, but we hadn't made the puppet yet. That often happens at that very early stage in rehearsals. And so I'm just pretending effectively to kind of be the puppet. I think let's watch it. Let's watch that clip.
Ding 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 ding. It's humbug still. I won't believe it.
Lighting changes. We added some Scrooges.
Oh, sorry. Scrooge! Scrooge!
The same face. The very same face. What do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who are you then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
We'll do it then.
You don't believe in me.
I don't.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them treats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese. But there's more of gravy than of grave about you, I tell you. Humbug! Humbug!
You've got both the arms now so that he can stretch. Oh, Scrooge!
Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
So obviously, I think we might have mentioned it. I think there was a back and forth a little bit with our director Mark at that time, where we said, "Oh, he's going to stretch." So we knew that the puppet was going to have a stretchy quality to his arms, but we weren't sure exactly how that would work.
Yeah. And we knew that we wanted it to come out of the fire. We'd made the decision that we really liked the idea that Scrooge went home, had this little fire, and that the puppet was going to come out of that fire.
We weren't sure exactly how.
No, we didn't know exactly how.
But we wanted that to happen.
You're doing some excellent fire acting.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the wiggly wiggly finger fire acting. So we'll now show you the clip from the actual show.
It's humbug still. I won't believe it. The same face. The very same face. What do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who were you then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
We'll do it then.
You don't believe in me?
I don't.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. Yes. You may be a bit of undigested beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. Humbug, I tell you, humbug!
Scrooge!
Oh, mercy! A dreadful apparition! Why do you trouble me?
And you'll notice with that clip that in essence the choreography of the moment is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it's not me now, it's the puppet doing the movement, but we did have him come out of the fire. He was the fire, in fact, was how we made that happen with his hair.
Yep.
And then the sequence of movements for that first little bit is basically, well, we think it's exactly the same.
Yeah, it is, and you know, it's nice when you can realise your ideas so completely insofar as, you know, we were able to make him stretch in the right way, we were able to make his hair into the fire and have him sit there in a way that worked, and so we were able to do most of those ideas, and we didn't have to change too much of that. It's also worth noting that obviously Antonia's being the puppet in that, and that happens quite often for us because we make everything as we go along. It tends to be one of two ways. Either we haven't made everything we need yet, so we have to carry on and figure out what we think will happen and how we think it will work. Or even in cases where we have actually made the puppet, it's always worth doing a version or doing a run, doing a rehearsal without the puppet.
Sometimes you get some nice characterisation from that. I don't know why in that research and development week he came out with this kind of very bad, and apologies to if there's any Scottish people watching, I'm sorry about that. But that ended up sticking, I think, because of his stereotypical, but I have red hair, so I'm allowed to say it, red hair, fire. So it stuck. So there are things that will stick with that kind of thing actually, and it's often worth getting to get sort of more of the characterisation. Sometimes we do work without the puppets.
Yeah, because sometimes you do movements physically that you then think, oh, actually that feels really natural to do that. I can get the puppet to do that. Yeah.
So that's the entry of Marley, which very much stayed the same. However, in the research and development week, obviously we did the whole scene, so we did the exit of Marley, and we'll show you that clip now.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first, then the bell tolls one. That was that bit, wasn't it?
Well, couldn't I take them all at once and have it over with, Jake?
Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us.
And then the fire, you were back in the fire.
And you shut
the fire and then got your pledge ready in this sort of
And you'll notice in that clip we have Marley becoming the fire again. So he retreats back to the same position he started from, which at the time we thought that would be it gave it a nice sort of
Circular.
yeah, thank you.
Cyclical, sure.
Whatever, yeah, circular, whatever thing. So it was nice that he started and finished in the same position.
Yeah.
However, when it actually came to when we had the puppet and imagined, because at the time, even in rehearsals, when we had the puppet, we didn't necessarily have the door in exactly the right place.
Mm-hmm.
It became clear quite quickly that it was pretty difficult to retreat elegantly back into the fire. Because I had to sort of bend in such a way without tripping over the bottom of the door frame, whilst making sure that Marley went elegantly back down, and it was clumsy.
To be fair, getting out of the fire
was tricky enough.
enough. You had enough obstacles, and we had to kind of choreograph that and make sure, okay, it's move that arm, move that foot. So the idea of having to put all that back, for what? You know?
And you have to, we're always sort of saying, well, how much can we ask of our audience? What can we expect them to kind of endure, as it were, in terms of watching practical things happen? And they've seen this cool entry of the puppet through the fireplace, but watching it go back, it just wasn't ever going to be as good as the entry. And it made it for a weak exit, in fact.
Yeah, and if it is a big challenge practically, you know, if it means that mechanically it's going to be really difficult and awkward to do, you're then going to be stuck behind the door, the puppet's also going to be back there behind the door, which is in the way, then you ask yourself, well, what's the value of that? Yeah. What are we gaining by doing that? And in fact, you've had that effect already. You've seen him come out of the fire.
We don't need to repeat
it turned out it was much more efficient and practical to just finish the scene and get rid of him. And in the book, in fact, he exits out the window.
That's exactly what I was about to say. And in fact, that's what we did. We went back to the book, I think, and we sort of said, okay, well, what happens in the book? Where does he go? And in fact, he goes out of the window, and then there's all these other spirits that Scrooge sees out the window. Well, obviously, we didn't want to do that. But we decided, we often say in rehearsals, don't we? If it were a film, what would we want to do? Because we try and not limit ourselves with the practicalities too much.
Sure.
And we'd said, if it were a film, it would be really, at that moment, what would happen is he probably would go through Scrooge. So we'll show you the clip of the exit now from the actual show.
Expect the first when the bell tolls one.
Wouldn't I take them all at once and have it over with, Jacob?
Look to see me no more, but look that, for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us.
And as you can see there, obviously we can't put the puppet through Scrooge, but we tried to give the essence of that. So he goes sort of whooshing over the top of him with the kind of the chains and everything.
Yeah, and it's quick, it's clean.
Yeah.
You know, the scene's ended. Let's get him out. Let's get rid of him.
And actually, because it ends with the nice whoosh of energy of him going off, you're left with that fizzing in the air for a moment, which I think is really nice. Whereas when he was kind of retreating clunkily back into the fire, it sort of just fizzled out into a damp squib. Yeah,
and then again, from that practical point of view, it means that puppet never returns, so we've effectively got rid of that puppet, and it means that Antonia's then not trapped behind the door. You're free to go and do whatever you've got to do next.
So that made a lot of sense, and we were pleased with that solution. But there's a good example, really, of something which, in theory, you think, oh, that might be lovely, and in practice, you're like, actually, that just isn't how you want that moment to happen. So those are the clips we're going to show you for today, but we have some more.
Yes, we didn't want to, turn this into an hour-long episode, so we thought we'd split it up. We are going to show you a few more examples from later in the show next time, though.
Thank you very, very much for watching, and we've already said the like, subscribe, comment thing, but
do it again
if you haven't.
And if you've got any questions or anything arising from what we've shown you that you'd like to ask, please do, and we'll do our best to answer them.